This episode of the podcast is brought to you by New Bloom Labs.
Seasoned cannabis producers know that weeks-old crop or old product data simply isn't viable. It's simply unacceptable to wait 1 to 2 weeks or even longer for full panel analysis of your cannabis products. That's why you need to know about New Bloom Labs. They test plant material for potency monitoring, full panel analysis, and official state compliance testing. The guys at New Bloom Labs are the real deal, with locations in Tennessee and Texas and more to come soon. New Bloom Labs provides precise, accurate analysis and the best turnaround time in the industry. They always provide next business day turnaround on potency tests and 1 to 2 business day turnaround on most toxin screenings. They're ISO certified and DEA registered, so you know their science is first rate. It's time to stop being frustrated with your third-party labs. Call New Bloom Labs at 844-TEST-CBD or visit their website at newbloomlabs.com. Superior science, rapid results, New Bloom Labs.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
Are you using whiteboard, spreadsheets, and email to manage your cultivation, distribution, and manufacturing processes? If so, it's a good time to consider incorporating Regrow to automate manual tasks, reduce costs, and avoid shortages by creating dynamic workflows that maximize yields and increase profitability for your business. Regrow is the single pane of glass view into your entire supply chain, available globally with native localization and foreign language support. If you have a vertically integrated and/or multi-state operation, Regrow will help you increase your revenue while keeping your entire operation fully compliant. If you're a cannabis company searching for a strategic business partner to help you automate your business, scale effectively, and make the supply chain work for you, you can find Regrow at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system. Hello everyone, Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Todd Sullivan, co-CEO at Cannapreneur Partners. Hey Todd, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Kevin. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for making time for us today. I know before we recorded, you said you were actually undergoing a snowstorm right now. Where are you?
Yeah, we're about 30 miles outside of Boston. So we had our first big event. Looks like we got about a foot on the ground right now, and a lot of winds. And I think that's saying more might come this afternoon. So everybody's kind of hunkered down in their own places right now while they dig us out.
Got you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's getting colder here in Dallas. I've never been to Boston. I really want to make it out there. I've heard that the city's great and the food is amazing. So
yeah, come in September or October, because you come in October. I mean, the heat won't be a big deal for you, but you'll be able to see the leaves and stuff. It's really an amazing place in the fall when the leaves start turning on all the trees and the weather's nice and the breeze is cool off the ocean. So it's a great time. It's my favorite time. When I didn't live here, it was always my favorite time to visit New England. So
awesome. Yeah. Well, definitely keep that in mind. And, hopefully during that time, we're past a lot of this pandemic and we can live some normalcy at some point,
Yeah, let's hope so. I'm done with the lockdowns. So.
Me too. You and me both, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm done with it.
So for those listening, I'm talking with Todd Sullivan. He's the co-CEO at Cannapreneur Partners, which is a cannabis investment firm focused on early stage companies. So Todd, before we get into Cannapreneurs, I have one just kind of side question, and I don't mean this facetiously at all, because I know the Cannapreneur executive team has already raised and deployed $90 million through the cannabis space through different ventures. So I come across very rarely where there's a co-CEO. So what is your role and kind of what is the executive team structure like in that regard?
Well, so Michael Scott is the founder of the company. He started Cannapreneur Partners, and it's kind of like, I don't know how the best way to describe it is, we kind of have very complementary skill sets. and kind of just melding the role into the two people kind of just worked for us, because I handle more of the day-to-day operations, so Michael's more of the deal negotiation, sort of the big picture structure of the organization. Then the deals come in, we'll vet them, they'll come to me, and I'll kind of implement either how we're going to go get financing for them, how we're going to structure the deals, things like that. So it's working really well. There's no, we're kind of done with the title things at Cannapreneur. You know what I mean? It tends to silo people into jobs, and when you're Cannapreneur is itself a startup, and you really can't have people siloed in a startup, right? It needs to be all hands on deck. Whatever we need to do, we need to do. So because of that, Michael's like, we're really just doing the same thing. So let's just call it what it is, because for outside people, titles really matter. They don't for us internally. So, you put the title on there, and it just makes things easier for other people to understand what's going on.
I'm so glad that you have that mindset, because I totally agree. And in my experience, the capacity of consulting like small business owners for their marketing efforts, I've seen that, especially in the startup space, even before they launch, they're so tied to what the title is and what they're doing and whatnot. And it's like, I'm sitting back and I'm thinking, like, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. You know what I mean? Like, divide, conquer, like, figure out what your skill set is and go that way. The title will come, right? That stuff, it's just it's just labeling right now, really. I mean, when you're that early age.
Yeah, I mean, anyone can start a company in one and call themselves the CEO, right? At the end of the day, you're the CEO, the treasurer, the cook, the bottle washer, everything, right? So you do what you need to do, and I'd be much happier if most organizations didn't have titles. I think it would make internal workflow go a lot easier, because hey, we need to get this job done. Who's good at what? Let's break it up. Let's get the job done. Does it really matter what the title is associated with it? I don't think it does. And I think cannabis is starting to move that way. The industry itself, I'm noticing more and more, just generic titles for people like that. And I think that's a great thing. So
well, I agree. What's funny is that before entering the cannabis space, I worked for one of the largest telecom companies in their marketing department, and this was kind of put your tinfoil hat on. I didn't know if this was like a tactic or what, but they gave a lot of mid-level employees the same title, in that it was like lead marketing manager, so everyone was a manager, yet no one was managing teams. It was like they were managing projects, they were managing platforms or relationships with vendors. But so I always wondered, like, why, and those types of environments where it's so big and they're established, it's kind of very competitive, right? So I never understood the naming, behind that, or what.
And I think, but if you look at those situations, you look at those organizations, some of those tend to be, I don't know about you, but whenever I call the phone company, I'm like, oh, geez, here we go. I want to be on for 20 minutes to get something simple done, right? I think it breeds massive inefficiency. The more structured organizations, the more people you have to talk to get something done. Oh, that's not my department, that's so-and-so. Okay, now I need to talk to my manager in this department. That's part of another department. By the time you're done, you've spoken to 5 people, and all it was like, I just need a replacement phone set. I mean, so I see it.
That's exactly right. And it's not like those people are passing the buck. It's that literally their job is stay in this lane, turn this knob. And if you do, then you're stepping outside of your scope, and now you're stepping in other people's territory. So there's that real fine line, right?
It's not laziness. They don't have access to do what you need.
Right.
They don't have the ability even if they want to help you, they don't have the ability to. And that's a major flaw in most organizations. More people should be empowered to help, right? Because ultimately customers are your lifeline, and customers are your best marketing if they're happy, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the more people who are empowered to help, the better. And so many organizations, like you just said, that here's your lane. Anything even one step over, you got to send it to the other guy. And that's just, the best organizations. So before AT&T bought DirecTV, okay, I could call DirecTV if I had a problem and have my problem fixed. If it took more than 5 minutes, it was like, wow, that was a long phone call.
Right.
I can't call. I've called AT&T on a Sunday 3 times to add the red zone to my Sunday ticket.
Yeah.
At least a half hour on the phone each time to different people to say, oh, we can't help you. Can you call back Monday? they've gone from the best customer service ever to quite possibly the worst.
Yeah.
And it's because of exactly what you said. I had to talk to 5 people. That's not my department, not my department. They've done what you said.
Yeah.
And they've completely ruined that. For me, they've ruined DirecTV.
Yeah.
So
I'll take a step further. I have 2 accounts, right, with AT&T, because I have my wireless phone bill, which I pay them, and then like you mentioned, I have internet, which is who did they buy for their internet? Anyway, so when I go to my billing app, like both of those accounts for those 2 different services, they're not under one umbrella. So like you said,
yes.
and pay a bill here, I don't even see it's like hard for me to find out what I owe each month, because
Yep.
they're separate. But so this is actually a good segue. So you have a lot of experience outside of the cannabis industry, right? I mean, started your first company at the age of 18. So,
Yeah.
so tell us about your background, and then really get into like what you see in terms of differences, good or bad, that you've discovered in the cannabis industry.
So my background, really quick, talking about myself is my least favorite thing to do. So, I started my first business at 18 in college. I came home the first summer, and worked for a guy installing above ground swimming pools. And quickly came to the realization that we were all doing the same job, but because he had the shovels, and the truck, he was making 5 times what we were. So the next spring came around. I went to the pool company. I said, hey, I did this for you, this guy, this summer. I'll hire a crew of guys, and we could do 30, 40 pools for you in the summer. They were like, great. I said, I just need a letter from you for the bank saying that I have this job and should be able to make X. And in 1989, that was sufficient for the bank to give me an auto loan and to give me a loan to buy equipment. So
Wow.
I did that. Yeah. So I hired some friends in the next 3 summers. We just installed.
Intent. Let you just
Yeah.
intent. Damn.
Yeah. That was so it would have been 80. It would have been like 88. It would have been. Yeah. And they were like, oh, okay, that's good. You have income. That's good. So the next 3 summers, me and my friend just put in above ground swimming pools in upstate New York. Worked outside every day. It was awesome in the summer. So that was my first business that I started. And after that, I was hooked. It's like, that's why, and every job I've had since then has been some sort of entrepreneurial venture, one way or another. In 2007, I started blogging just kind of on a whim, on the suggestion of someone at the website Seeking Alpha.
Yeah.
It was brand new at that time. I had been sending them some emails about stocks, and the guy was like, hey, just give me your blog address. We'll put your blog on it. I'm like, that's great. I got off the phone and Googled what's a blog, and I ended up using the Blogger platform. And financial blogging at that point in time was
Huge.
was probably.
I mean, it was so valuable, right? Like, because it was so new.
Yeah, it was very new. There weren't many people doing it, so it led to instant exposure, and ended up the hedge fund came out of it, and I've been doing the blog for 13 years now. It's been great. People love it. So, and that it's led to one thing after another. So then in about 2017, 2018, I really saw cannabis. I was like, you know what, I really need to be involved in the cannabis space. But I didn't like the public markets at all.
You've been at the time, were you still in Massachusetts, or were you somewhere where it was legal?
No, I've been in Massachusetts since 1991.
Okay.
So I've been, yeah. It was medical legal here, but not adult use. Adult use in November 2018. I said I have to be involved in the space, but public markets, you could see that train wreck coming. We've seen it a million times in financial history, right? The chart behind me, that's the old tulip bulb thing from the 1600s, right? That's the big tulip bulb thing, and that's exactly what cannabis public markets did, right? There was too few stocks. Everyone wanted to be in the space. They drove prices crazy, and eventually reality hit, and prices came down just as fast. So I knew I wanted to be on the private side, but I didn't know anybody I didn't know anyone who knew cannabis, who knew business, or anyone in business was in the cannabis. So finally, I stumbled across Cannapreneur Partners, and oddly enough, it's probably half a mile from my house, and I've never known. Yeah, I started researching, walked in, had conversations, walked in as an investor, made an investment, and then, I just put it out on my blog, and we ended up raising about $2 million just from the blog followers. We made another investment in Cannapreneur. Started working. I said, hey, if I got all this invested here and I want to be involved, so I volunteered, come in and be involved. And one thing led to another, and now here we are having this conversation. So it's been a fantastic ride, and the industry itself is it's sort of a dichotomy. I look, you have the old time cannabis guys, been doing it for 30, 40 years. Then you have the new MBAs coming into the space because they see the business aspect of it. You have some inherent culture clash, but I've seen the industry, it's much more collaborative than other industries I've worked in. Every industry has its fringe elements on either side, right? But as a whole, people really just want to. The overriding goal for most people is to bring this plant to the masses, right? Is to grow the industry, grow the business, give it the legitimacy that it needs, and educate people on, hey, you know what? This is one of the healthiest plants out there. It does a lot of good for people.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is while we all have our own businesses, at the end of the day, we're all involved in the same thing. And I think that's a great thing about the industry.
And it's a beautiful time, right? Because
Yeah.
I don't want to be negative, right? But like most mature, established industries, like we talked about telecom earlier, they just become kind of a machine at that point, right? Where
Yeah.
turning and burning. But we're at a beautiful time right now in the industry where it is that collaborative effort because of exactly your point. We want to get the plant to the masses.
Yeah.
We're still fighting federal regulation. We're still fighting, the battle of educating people that have no idea about the plant that, hey, this is actually very beneficial in a lot of different ways,
Yeah. Yeah, it's huge. And to your point about the collaborative effort, that it's not even you and I working together to grow our separate businesses, but do good for the industry. It's regulators too, and the Cannabis Control Commission in Massachusetts. I think most people, you hear regulators, they go crazy, but I mean they've done a really great job listening to the business people and adapting policies to help. And the delivery license is the perfect example. That delivery license was completely uninvestable 2 years ago. The way the regulations were originally set up.
What is the delivery license for my knowledge and for people listening? So
To be able to deliver adult use cannabis from dispensaries to recreate adult use cannabis from dispensaries to people's homes.
and this was in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, right?
Okay.
That license was the way it was set up. You couldn't wholesale any of your product. Okay. You couldn't wholesale it, so you had to basically go, and there was an upcharge. You couldn't make money doing it. Okay. The Cannabis Control Commission listened to the business people. They adapted the regulations, and now it's one of the hottest licenses to acquire. Everyone's trying to get one. So you have an instance here of a regulator seeing that this part of this ecosystem of businesses wasn't going to work. Let's work with the business people, change the regulations to make it work. And now you have another whole group of entrepreneurs coming up, able to start businesses with this license. And well, again, our goal, bring it to the masses. So that's just another example of how even business people and regulators are being collaborative to try and grow this industry.
Absolutely. I mean, especially how you mentioned at the state level. I mean, when you say earlier, like some people may go, regulators. I mean, I get that, but in this industry, there's a lot of, especially the good actors that are actually begging for regulation. And I'm talking at the federal level, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the kind of ironic thing is that you've got these state and local officials that are willing to work with the farmers and the operators to kind of, make it work. And then you've got, I'm not saying that the federal government isn't willing to help. They're just not. They've just kind of been quiet, So we're really waiting.
I think part of the problem with the federal government is it's just lack of education, right? And it's a refusal to become educated. There's people who have had stances on this plant for 20, 30, 40 years in Congress who just refuse to see any other side of the equation but that, right? And it's really, at this point, it's if you don't see the benefit of the plant right now, it's just because you refuse to see it, right? We have the data. We know what happens when you legalize cannabis in your state. We know opioid deaths fall. We know prescriptions fall. We know alcohol sales fall. We know alcohol deaths fall. I mean, I could go on for 20 minutes of the immediate benefits to your state when legalize cannabis. So those people who are voting against it are just standing on politics over pragmatism.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it is. And they're just refusing to see the reality because they voted one way for 20, 30 years and don't want to say, I changed my mind on this or I changed my mind on that. It's sad that that's the way our governors and legislatures in a lot of states and the federal government tend to run things. But I think it's changing. You know, we're at about 70% of the U.S. population wants adult use cannabis legal right now. In history, when we've gotten that level, and politicians magically find religion on that, right? My stance has evolved and things like that, and I think state budgets are going to force the issue anyway.
Yeah.
States have to legalize. New York, Cuomo was like yesterday in New York saying, we should have had this money 2 years ago to legalize cannabis. So
Saw that. Yeah, I saw that headline. I didn't read the article, but I saw his quote saying that.
yeah,
And they're already, and that is alluding to, of course, post pandemic, right? Like, what kind of economic relief are we going to be seeking? And we should definitely be looking toward cannabis for tax revenue purposes.
yeah. There was a study out, was it yesterday, the day before? If we legalize it federally, we create at least another 1.5 million jobs and another 14 some billion dollars in tax revenue for the federal government. And states budgets are in shambles right now. They're decimated, and their only option is to raise taxes on existing people or find new tax revenue. And cannabis is proven state by state to be a massive immediate tax revenue generator for states. So I think the states are gonna, if the federal government does nothing the next 2 years, I think by the time the next 2 years are over, more than half the U.S. is adult use legal, because the states don't have a choice. They have to do it.
100%. Todd, I am 100% agree. Yeah. I mean, I echo that. I've said it. It's like we're gonna force the federal government's hand at some point. How many states are already legal? Is it like 35, 30?
No, so for medical,
Medical.
yeah, I think medical, I think is up to almost 40 now. And given the last election's hard. We were at 11 adult use, 5 went legal in the last election, but now South Dakota's trying to play games. Someone in South Dakota sued. So, we're anywhere between 14 and 16, depending how it actually shakes out with states that just legalized. But I think we'll be over 25 by the end of 2022 easily.
Yeah.
Easily. If they're not by the end of next year, they'll either be well into the process of legalizing, or it'll be on a ballot for people to vote. They don't have a choice. And it's honestly, it's a great tax revenue. It creates jobs and saves lives. So, I mean, what's the problem, right? Where's the disconnect?
It's good for the environment too.
Exactly. Right. I mean, so they'll do it. It'll happen. It's going to be a slow, painful slog, but it'll happen.
Yeah, I agree. So let's get back to, okay, so you were saying 2018, you kind of looked at the stock market when it came to cannabis stocks, and man, what a bad year, right? A lot of kind of hype around certain companies. So that's when you started looking at, okay, let me look at more of private companies to invest in, right?
Yeah.
That's where you came upon Cannapreneurs.
Right. Because look what was happening. Those MSOs were expanding by running around buying all the private companies they could, right? Tilray wasn't coming into Massachusetts and building dispensaries from the ground up, right? They were coming and buying organizations, and they were buying them at absurd multiples. So think about it. If you're going to invest in that space, I don't want to be the buyer of that asset at that price. I want to be the seller, right? Mm-hmm. And as long as it's federally illegal, that dynamic is going to continue. So that's why I wanted to get into this side of the space.
So what are y'all focused on? I mean, is it primarily early stage dispensaries, ancillary companies, real estate? Like, what are you guys focusing?
So we're focusing on the consumer. I'm very leery about cultivation right now, because we're not sure where we stand on it on the federal level. If the Democrats succeed in Georgia in the runoffs, they in theory then have the House, the Senate with the tiebreaker, and they have the White House. The House has already passed a legalization bill. Obviously, there would be compromises in the Senate to get it through, but they could jam it through. Mm-hmm. So the way we look at our business, if say we have $20 million to invest, that's one decent cultivation in Massachusetts. You got to build an indoor cultivation. That $20 million gets you one decent one. If it becomes federally legal next summer, right? Wholesale prices in Massachusetts are almost $4,000 a pound right now.
Wow.
If I can buy from Oregon for $700-800 and ship it across the U.S., I'm not buying from my Massachusetts cultivation guy, right?
Right.
That's one scenario. The other scenario is states are able to enact tariffs and taxes and excise taxes to equalize the playing field.
Right.
But we don't know. We don't know the answer, and we can't we can't game it either way and place odds either way how it's going to work out. So that $20 million investment could become very impaired very quickly. But if I'm involved on the consumer side, either through dispensaries or manufacturing and extraction, if it goes federally legal, my business just got way better, right? My input costs fall and I can ship it anywhere, right? So those businesses under that scenario get very good very quick. And for the same money, I can build 3 to 4 extractions. I can build 10 to 15 dispensaries for that $20 million. So our risk profile is much reduced. So we love the consumer, we love dispensaries, we love extraction and manufacturing. I think 10 years from now, very few people are going to be smoking cannabis. I think most of it's going to be consumed either through edibles or vape cartridges or food. We're very seriously considering investment in a food producer in cannabis in Massachusetts, who is a widely renowned chef who's got a business that we think is going to be fabulous. So you kind of look at it, we want to be Starbucks, not the coffee grower.
Yeah.
That's where we look at the thing. So anything consumer facing, we like real estate. We love the food, the edibles, delivery we're interested in. So if you touch the consumer directly, we're interested.
And so taking it a deep further, do you focus solely on THC, or are you also exploring like hemp and the CBD and other cannabinoid products?
Right now, because of where we're located in Massachusetts, the multiples and the investment returns on THC is just, it's beyond anything else that's out there, you know. So
$4,000 a pound, man, that's crazy.
wholesale, retail's about 7,500. We have the highest cannabis prices in the nation right now in Massachusetts.
I've never heard of it that high. I mean, I've heard
Yeah.
like three grand a pound in say like Oklahoma, you know.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's insane. So I mean, our average dispensary is doing 15 million a year. That's 3 to 4 times the national average. Um, the reason is we have, last count I saw was there's 58 adult use dispensaries open in Massachusetts. That's it for the Eastern Seaboard.
Right.
That's it. I think Maine might have one, but you know, it's 4 hours away and it's in the middle of the woods. So, you know, it's just, we're the market. We are the market right now. So demand is off the charts.
Right. Well, speaking of you know, private investment opportunities, what like from your perspective, what's the current state of capital in the cannabis industry? You know, and what do you expect in the next few months?
There really isn't any capital in the cannabis industry right now. You know, these people can't go to banks. They can't go to traditional financing routes. So they're stuck looking for private investors in the space. And the opportunity, I mean, you know, we just, before we got on the phone here, we were going through a deal analysis, and you know, we have 20 deals in front of us right now that are all fantastic deals. All fantastic deals. The number of qualified people who need money is, it's off the charts. You know, we could raise $100 million and have quality deals for that money sitting here waiting for us. So capital is non-existent, and COVID made it worse. You know, I mean, a lot of the
totally due to COVID. There was not capital before.
Yeah, no. I think COVID there was not capital before COVID. It just scared people, right? People are scared. What's the economy going to look like? Yes, cannabis has proven to be very recession resistant and has, you know, bloomed through COVID. But again, people are looking at their portfolios as a whole. They're seeing, you know, people are losing jobs, businesses are closing. So, you know, they kind of retrenched a little. And you have some people wanting to wait till we get to the other side to get, but then you have the more opportunistic investors like, hey, you know, we may go into recession, but cannabis sales are growing 23% year over year, right? They didn't slow down. As a matter of fact, they accelerated through the COVID shutdowns. So the opportunistic investors saying, hey, that's us. Hey, we think a lot of deals through COVID. You know, it's people are lining up at the door for funding. So.
Right. That totally makes sense. Do you see any impact on the northeastern markets, like, you know, New Jersey, New York, Cuomo talking about New York becoming legal, and East Coast expansion?
Yeah. So Cannapreneur, we like to call ourselves emerging market investors, and emerging markets are states, right? Because we don't have a national cannabis market. We have state by state. We have 50 individual potential markets in the U.S. So we look at New Jersey as an emerging market. We look at New York as an emerging market. So, and that's what we love to be. That's our sweet spot. We want to be early. If we can be the first or second investor in a company, we're thrilled. We get to bring experience, we can bring direction. We have a synergistic ecosystem of business. They all complement each other. We're looking at delivery and food, dispensaries, and automation with Anna, the vending machines, right? So, if we sign a deal with a dispensary owner, we bring a suite of products that we could bring to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have relationships with cultivation. So biggest problem in Massachusetts is supply. We can give people supply contracts if they need it from these cultivations. They've licensed us to do it. So um, it just really works. And I think that if you're facing the customer and you're dealing with the customer, I think you're going to be good in this space. I really do.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier you have like 20 or so really great potential investment opportunities. Can you talk a little about any of those specifically?
No,
Okay.
sorry. But I will say this: they're either in the delivery, the food, the extraction, or the dispensary space. That's what some of them will have small boutique cultivations that come with them. And if it's a small cultivation, uh, the risk is a lot lower because then you're essentially supplying yourself, right? If you're going to have 3 dispensaries in a 5,000 square foot cultivation, you're selling everything you grow, right? So if the wholesale market doesn't do well, that's okay because basically your whole crop's going to you, and it gives you guaranteed supply. While supply is tight, it's the ones that have 100,000 square foot facilities that make us really, really nervous because
Yeah.
we don't know what the economics of that are going to be like in a year or two.
Right. That makes sense.
And at the end of the day, cultivation is agriculture. And agriculture always is and always will be a race to the lowest price, right? Who can do it on the biggest scale for the cheapest? That's what agriculture is. And that's what cannabis cultivation is going to be eventually.
Mm-hmm.
It's not now because we have more demand than we do supply here. So that's why the price is so high, but it's going to get there. In Massachusetts, I think we have 2 times the amount of cultivation we currently have in the pipeline coming. So we know wholesale prices are going to fall. Even if it doesn't legalize, they're not going to be at $3,000 to $3,500 a pound for the next 2 or 3 years. They're going to go down. So,
Right.
yeah.
No, that makes sense. I was wondering when that would happen, the price drops, because I mean, from my perspective as a broker in Dallas, they're just all over the place, state by state, even strain by strain and cannabinoid by cannabinoid. CBD flower versus CBG flower is different. And so it's very interesting to see once the dust settles and where everything lands, once things become.
Yeah. I mean, and who knows what the landscape, for that kind of stuff looks like when the federal government gets involved, and assuming they legalize it or whatever, they just, I think we'll probably see decriminalization first. We'll see expungement of records first. Those are the least controversial things for the government to do and still, show progress on the cannabis front, right? I mean, I think everyone's pretty much behind that stuff right now.
Mm-hmm.
There was a guy in Florida, I think, who was just released, who served a 31-year sentence for agreeing to transport cannabis into Florida. I think it was in the 60s or 70s. He never did it, never touched it, agreed to do it. The guy was in jail for 31 years.
That is insane. I saw that post from the Last Prisoner Project. I wish we knew his name. But yeah.
He was a Florida guy, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
They're murderers who serve less time.
Yeah, it's crazy. I had Dante West on. He served a 3-year sentence for being falsely accused of transporting like a pound or something like that.
Yeah.
Friend blamed it on him, and he was telling me that in prison he met sex offenders, child molesters, murderers who were there for less time than him.
Yeah.
And
that just defies common sense.
Right. And his initial sentence was 7 years. He served 3 on the clemency. He got out, but it's insane,
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. There's no logic or reasoning behind any of it. I mean,
No.
31 years in prison. I mean, come on. Most murderers serve 25 and they're out.
Right. And like, can you imagine coming out of prison as that guy in Florida and like seeing a dispensary and seeing people smoking joints outside?
Yeah.
Like that has to be the most surreal moment. Like what, and it's
why have I been in jail the last 10 years and people are smoking all over the place in public now?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's crazy, man. Jeez.
It's half his life is gone. It's tragic is what it is. It's just tragic.
No, those wrongs definitely need to be undone,
Yeah,
and those
I agree.
out. So I agree with you that that makes sense. The first step for the federal government at, making slow progress is to at least do that, expunge
Yep.
records and give those people a chance, a second chance, at life.
Yeah. Yeah. If they'll do it if for no other reason there's self-interest. I think they're going to free, I don't know what the number is, 1 million people in prison for cannabis, right? They're looking at 1 million new voters, right? 1 million votes. So I mean, if for no other reason, their own self-interest will do it. But you know what? Who cares why? It's the right thing to do. Let's just get it done. You can bicker about the motives or whatever later, but it's the right thing to do. So let's just do it, and we can argue about the rest later.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that's what elections are for. We can argue about that at election time.
Yeah. I don't even know if politics really matter anymore anyway. So
It's been a nightmare the last. Yeah, it's whatever.
yeah, no, that's crazy. Hey, I
Yeah.
want to ask you this. When I was doing research, I don't really watch the show, but I saw that Shark Tank's Kevin Harrington joined
Mm.
Cannapreneur Partners. So tell me a little bit about how that came to fruition and what value Kevin adds to the group.
Well, so Kevin, I mean, for those who don't know him, Kevin was an original shark on ABC Shark Tank. Spent a couple seasons there, and Kevin single-handedly invented the ad scene on TV industry as we know it today. He brought Tony Little, Suzanne Summers, the George Foreman Grill, all these products, over $5 billion in global sales, and it's an amazing story. Kevin had a HVAC company he started when he was in college, sold it his junior year of college, and quit school, and was sitting there watching TV one night. At midnight, the TV went black. Used to go to the bars at night after when they signed off. So he called the network. He said, "How much to buy this airtime?" And they sold him airtime at a insanely stupid rate. Right? It was so cheap. And Kevin just started running these infomercials and started railing in money. Uh, the networks came back immediately and said, "Hey, we need to redo the deal." He's like, "I got a 10-year deal at this price." And Kevin amassed a nice little fortune for himself. But he saw an opportunity. He saw dead airtime. He bought it. He took the risk, and he made his fortune. So the number of products he's brought to market are amazing. So Kevin's really good for us because Kevin lives in Florida. Florida's had adult use for a while. They've been going back and forth on these licenses they have medical for adult use. And he saw what's coming in cannabis. He knew it was going to be the next big thing. He saw what happened out west. He knew it was going to come east, and he looked for groups. And an associate of his and Mike ran across each other at a conference a couple of years ago. And we just started talking. And Kevin became very interested, and he made an investment in Cannapreneur, joined our team as a strategic advisor. And Kevin's great because, he's been vetting entrepreneurs his entire life, and that's what CP does, right? So we're vetting cannabis entrepreneurs. We're listening to their business plans, listening to what they want to do, and we're making investment decisions based on that. And that's exactly what Kevin did. So Kevin gives us a lot of insight into vetting deals and talking to entrepreneurs and seeing their vision and really getting a feel for the person. Additionally, there really are no products right now. There are no brands in the East Coast for cannabis. The West Coast has their brands. Very popular brands that are up and down in California, and they moved into other states.
Papa and
That
Bar
doesn't,
being one, yeah.
yeah, that doesn't exist here in the East Coast. We have 58 dispensaries on the entire East Coast. There's no brands yet,
Right.
but it's coming, right? We're getting interest on the East Coast now from West Coast people. West Coast brands want to license brands out here, want to set up shop and start producing their own brands. So we have Kevin Harrington on staff at Cannapreneur that can help you with your brand, right? He could give your brand visibility. He could do the infomercials for your brand. He could do online webinars for your brand. And, I'm sorry, but if Kevin Harrington can't help you sell your brand, there's something wrong with your brand. I mean, he's proven it time and time again. So for Cannapreneur, it's great because if we're competing for something with another group, say, well, we have Kevin Harrington that on Monday morning can be helping you sell this brand to the entire state. Right? Do these other groups have anything like that? And no one does. So for Cannapreneur, it's massive because it helps us with deal flow. It helps us attract entrepreneurs who want to be with us simply because Kevin's here. And he's done this for so long. He's just invaluable with his advice and what he thinks about things and how he looks at businesses. And, it's been a great relationship so far. We're very thrilled about it.
Yeah, it seems like his skill set and his background, obviously, how much success he's seen is a perfect fit for what you guys do. And it's funny because the story you shared of how he made his his fortune initially by buying that airtime. Sounds a lot like what you did with the equipment, the trucks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, if you see the shot, it's like, why not? I mean, and I was 18 at the time. If I took it, I default on my loan, whatever. I got a little credit right for later, but I ended up paying for my school for me. So it was a great investment. It worked out perfect. And Kevin's the same way. He took a risk. He committed a large sum of money at the time to buy this airtime. It turned out to be a ridiculously cheap amount at the end of the day. But when he made that investment, he what was he investing in? He was investing in black airspace on a TV,
Right.
right? So he had to go create shows. He had to get the entrepreneurs and get the products. He had to do all that. So he took a risk, but he basically created an industry as we see on TV right now, like HVC and QVC. All those, they wouldn't exist without Kevin Harrington starting that years ago with that as seen on TV, late night TV. He created it. And all these, if you look at, aside from his wealth, but the wealth he's made for these other networks and all these other people and all these other entrepreneurs that are, at a home in Dallas or wherever, making a product and selling it in QVC. I mean, that access is because of what he created. So it's just a great story. And I don't know if there's a book on him or not, but there really should be, because when he tells the story, you're like, Jesus, this is brilliant. But if you put yourself there at the time, it was a huge gamble on his part, but he did it.
Huge gamble and a lot of work, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
you said, not just buying the airtime and sitting on it, but actually getting producers, creating content, entrepreneurs, products, selling. Like he had a vision for the whole thing,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And you even look at him now, he's doing the same thing now in Singapore. He bought airtime in Singapore and overnight things. So even some of these brands he's had for 20 years here, he's bringing them to Asia now. So it's just, yeah, he just sees it and he goes for it.
It's awesome. Wow. Well, what a great addition to have to the team, man. Uh,
Yeah.
I want to touch on one thing that you mentioned as we're wrapping up here, and that's,
Okay.
we're talking about big ag, right? And how that's basically how we should treat cannabis, because it is an agricultural crop, right? So what do you see next for this industry, say in the next 5 to 10 years? And then what is Cannapreneur Partners' long-term vision in the coming years also?
So for cannabis, so I say in the next 5 years, cannabis is absolutely going to be legal. If it's not legal on a federal level, 45 states are going to have it legal at the state level by that time. I think it'll be federally legal well before then, but we'll see what happens. But the federal status of it really does inhibit the agricultural product part of it, right? Because you have Altria and Constellation Brands are in it. You know what they're doing, right? They're waiting for it to be federally legal. They're going to build massive grow facilities and they're going to transport it all over, just like Altria does with cigarettes, right? It's
Right.
the same. It's the same business for them.
Right.
That's what they're going to do. They already have Marlboro joints ready to go. I mean, they have the whole infrastructure is ready to go. They're just waiting for that day.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't happen, then I think for the individual entrepreneurs, it's fantastic, because you're not going to have the 800-pound gorilla who can undercut you in every single state because they're growing, a $500,000 square foot grow facility, and you got a 10,000 square foot grow facility. They're going to grow at pennies compared to what you can grow at, right? If it's federally legal, I think some of the big players, you see massive consolidation almost immediately. The well-financed people are going to run around Wall Street, private equity. I mean, if we're being honest, when private equity is allowed to invest in this space on full scale, I mean, you know what happens to private equity. They're going to come running in with suitcases full of cash, throwing it at people, right? Because they're going to want to buy as much of the stuff as they can immediately. So again, I think the private side's where to be, because they're going to be buying those assets from privately held people. So when it's federally legal, I think it's going to be a tsunami of cash that hits the space. Right now, it's the biggest problem. I think there'll be too much money in the cannabis space when it's federally illegal. Prices are going to go ballistic. And for Cannapreneur, if we can, our goal is to establish as large a footprint as we can between now and that time. And then if it becomes legal, we sit back and we see what happens. Does the Blackstones of the world decide they want to buy a firm like Cannapreneur instead of starting their own and doing it themselves? Do we just say, hey, you know what? We're doing really well as it is. We just want to continue operating these businesses and having the cash flows comes in. It gives us a lot of options. And obviously we have shareholders, so we're going to make the best decision for our shareholders. But the goal right now is to have 108 dispensaries in 5 years, a stake in 108 dispensaries in 5 years. That'll be varying levels of ownership depending on state regulations. But that's the goal up and down the eastern seaboard. We're not interested out west, really. It's a mature market. The valuation multiples just aren't there compared to the East Coast. And we like it. We like, if everyone wants to use a baseball analogy, if California, Oregon, and Washington are in the seventh inning of the cannabis game, and the East Coast, I think we just finished batting practice. That's really where we are. So,
Yeah.
if the perfect deal out west came up, we might look at it. But right now, we're focused East Coast, emerging markets, get the footprint in. Legalization comes, it's going to be a massive rush to buy assets. And at that point in time, we just sit back and make a judgment call for our investors what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, we actually, the flip side is that scenario. We may get financed with someone else to do what they want to do, right? So we may be a vehicle for these private equity firms to acquire more assets, or who knows what happens. But there's going to be lots of options, I think, when that day comes.
Yeah, totally makes sense to just be laser focused on the East Coast market. Like you said, there's already brands that are established, products that are household names at this point on the West Coast, specifically, California and stuff. So
Yep.
opportunity is the East Coast, and it's exciting to see what you guys do there. I also want to talk about the other 1,000-pound gorilla in the room, and that is industrial hemp, right? So the fact that there's no waste of the plant. You can there's so many applications. You can make cars, houses, biofuel.
Yeah.
So what do you see on that side of the industry? And is there any point in time where you see Cannapreneur Partners jumping into that space?
I'm not excluding anything on that space. As far as hemp goes, hemp is oddly associated as being cannabis in so many states still. It's actually regulated as cannabis in a lot of states, which is beyond bizarre to me. Anyone with a third grade level of science education could understand that it's not the same plant, right? It's, oranges and apples are both fruits, but they're not the same thing, right? Cannabis and hemp are cousins, but they're not the same thing. So regulated in the same way is just moronic.
Right. There's the trichomes versus the stock and the fiber. They're handling it. They're growing it for different purposes.
So when I look at hemp, I look at a plant that has amazing opportunity for uses for everything, right? But I look at the end markets. It's just there's not enough demand for it for those items yet. You know what I mean? We could be making 90% of our clothing from hemp. We could be, making building products from hemp daily that are better than the concrete ones that are out there, right? But there's just not the demand for it yet. So then the agricultural side of hemp, I know some hemp farmers that are suffering because they don't have end markets for it yet.
Right.
I think that's mostly because of regulation. When the regulation becomes, not even reasonable, just rational, and they regulate it like cotton or soybeans or something like that instead of cannabis, then I think the end uses for that market explode pretty quick because it is better than a lot of what's out there,
right,
to use. But until that time comes, I think you have, it's almost like the opposite of the cannabis market. Now I'm just having an epiphany where you have tremendous supply of hemp, but not a lot of demand for it other than CBD. But we're producing way too much hemp for the amount of CBD that we need. Whereas cannabis is tremendous demand, but limited supply because of the regulations. So it's almost the exact opposite market. So when people just wake up, and I think we'd have to be naive not to think that there's, heavy industries, the cotton industry, I'm sure, is fighting any hemp regulation to allow them to grow it, right? There's just no way these other lobbying groups aren't trying to squash hemp. And they're being very successful right now by associating it with cannabis. Because every time you talk about hemp, they talk about low THC, right? They have to add the THC in there when you talk about hemp. So, but I think it has amazing, incredible potential uses. It really does. Yeah. It just needs regulators to allow it to be used for those things on a large scale. And I think it'll be fantastic. But until that happens, it's an odd tug of war right now.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, it's just a weird time with the regulations, the classifying and the way in which we describe the plant, right? We kind of categorize it in like 2 or 3 different ways. You got marijuana, you got cannabis, you got hemp, and your point about the cotton industries and whatnot, always kind of making those disclaimers, low THC. I mean, I think that that's been all part of the whole reason why prohibition started, right? And why it has been regulated and listed as a Schedule 1, because ultimately it's a threat to industry, and it has been for a while, because we've this plant for many, many different purposes for hundreds of years, right?
I mean, for clothing, it's better for clothing than cotton.
Right.
So you better bet there's a large interest that are very, very interested in keeping hemp where it is and not letting it be used in all states very easily to produce things and make things for consumers. I mean, I get really dry skin this summer. I use this hemp-based lotion. It's the best thing I've ever used in my life. It's just like a hemp oil lotion. It takes care of it. I've suffered with it for 10, 15 years, and I bought that. I'm like, you know what? I'll try this, and it works fantastic. So, I mean, there's no denying the end use efficacy of it. It's just getting people out of the way so that market can grow.
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
And hey, get out of the way, because we're coming, man. This industry is moving at a great pace, and the momentum's there. And so we appreciate, guys like you, Todd, that are passionate about the plant and are looking to help early stage companies, with investment opportunities to really thrive in this industry. So
yeah, it's just, honestly, you just skip to work every day because you're doing two things. You're helping bring this plant to the masses, and you're helping educate people and understand what it can do. And if we're being honest, we haven't even scratched the surface of what it can do medically. We haven't even scratched it. So there's that's another hour-long podcast on the potentials there. But then you're helping people build fortunes, which is always a very rewarding thing.
Yeah.
There's people trying to build these businesses that can't get cash. If you can get them to their doors and get them open, they're going to do well.
Absolutely.
And that's a really rewarding thing to be able to do that. So
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, hey, we'll run it back next time, and we'll talk about the medicinal benefits in the medicine, if you want.
I'm happy to. More comes out every single day about what this is doing. And people want to say, well, it's not a scientific study. It's okay. Well, you had X amount of opioid deaths in this state for 7 years. They legalized cannabis. Now they have Y, and Y is way down here. Okay. What else? Did meth addicts just not become meth addicts anymore? Right? Tell me else what happened. You know what I mean? And oh, by the way, these other 10 states that did that, they saw the exact same thing at the exact same time. Right. So, I think if you're looking at the data we're seeing and you're still not convinced, you're refusing to be convinced. You're
in denial. And the biggest head scratcher for me, the biggest head scratcher is the way in which the Schedule 1 classification, how it's defined, and how and it's harmful to your health and this and that and the other. Whereas, you have the government that's patented CBD, different, I guess, delivery options or different ways in which to intake CBD. So there's just this it's counterintuitive. It's not adding up,
so to be classified as a Schedule 1 narcotic, it has to be dangerous, meaning you can overdose. There's never been a recorded cannabis overdose.
Right.
It has to have no medicinal value. Well, the government holds 3 patents on cannabis for medicinal use, and the FDA has approved 2 drugs for cannabis use. So that gets that away. And it has to be addictive. And there's no physically addictive qualities to cannabis whatsoever. So it fails all 3 tests, yet it still remains where it is, which, again, that's just our government refusing to acknowledge something or change course because they've held the same course for so long.
Right. Well, hey, they can't stop us from talking about it and educating ourselves and learning more about it, and that's what we're going to continue to do. And that's what this podcast is aimed to do. And I appreciate having guys like you on, Todd, who have that experience and knowledge and expertise, man. So
thank you. That was a great time. I had a great time. Thanks a lot. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Yeah, let's run it back. And where can people find y'all's website and anywhere else online that you want to?
Cannapreneurpartners.com. That's the easiest way to do it. Head to our website. All our contact information is right there. So.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Todd. And I really appreciate y'all for listening.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye now.